Heidegger says of Nietzsche's metaphysics that it can be stated in the simplest way possible in the following verse. World game, the ruling force, blends being and appearance. The eternally fooling force blends us in too, or blends us in also. Also blends us in. Being and appearance seeming to be the main thing, just like is that exactly just like in Schopenhauer with the appearance and will? So I've been listening to this Agamben lecture. I think it's called something like the Archaeology of the Command. It has some uses sorting out different directions within Heidegger. And I think listening to him, I think one would have to put Judith Butler on the anarchy side. He's got this anarchy side, and then the side with the word as the command, which he's giving to the democratic side. I think of the example, I think of Butler as wanting to, the anarchist, it's like what Nietzsche says about the qualitas occulta. It's like going into this, the hiddenness of the essence rather than positively stating it. It's not really that Judith Butler wants to go around saying, I identify as this, that, or the other. Like, here's this category of gender, there's a democratic ledger, and I identify as number 73 or so. It's rather more like she wants to go into the qualitas occultae, or however it's said, occulta, the hiddenness of it. I take that to be more the anarchist position. So she gives this example. She's in a hotel somewhere, and some poor man there is taxed with the duty of deciding who is meant to be in which of the locker rooms at the swimming pool that they have in the hotel, and he can't tell whether Judith Butler is a man or a woman, and how he should address her, sir, madam, sir, madam. She gives a account of him stuttering in embarrassment and excruciating embarrassment, not knowing what to say here. And her point is sort of why, when she goes into public, so he sees her, taken phenomenologically, it's like, here's a human being, but he doesn't know if we're dealing with a man or a woman. And then it's as though, so that's sort of still that's on the first something side. There's something there, but there's no positive command or, as it were, efficacious speech that says, here we have gender 32, and then we know just what follows from that, or whatnot, or here we have a man, here we have a woman, and we know what follows from that. There's nothing. So the anarchist position, it seems to me, is more like this position of going into the quote-unquote the X of the uninterpreted in Nietzsche's essay on the, how's it called, the truth and lies in the extra-moral sense or in a non-moral sense. It's as though there were an uninterpreted which could precede the truth of being, as it were. But in a way that doesn't work. I don't think that can work because, how so far is where's this line where Nietzsche is breaking, is not seeing this truth of being, but still doing metaphysics? So I think in a way we have to answer this question in order to be able to make a comparison to what's happening in a potential comparison to with regard to these Sino-Occidental um, worlds. Um, so with the Wolfgang Kohler example of an ape, say, or a chimpanzee, it's always like the scientists are setting a problem or so, and then the apes discover some tool to solve that problem, and then it seems like there's a presupposition that, okay, the apes are gonna, the chimpanzees or whatever they are, they have this hunger impulse or instinct, and then we can play on that. We can put some food somewhere, and then they'll, in order to satisfy their instinct to satisfy their hunger, they'll come up with a solution to the problem. So how far can we go from something, a kind of contrived situation like that, where a tool comes into existence because of a problem, to a situation where instead of a problem, we have a real questioning, the open question, and what are the conditions by which this happens? And how so far can we say, for instance, that the Occidental situation or the, let's say, the humanistic Athenian situation, rather than the more, let's say, authoritative and guilt situation of the Jerusalem. Remembering that I suppose in Agamben's view, Derrida's democratic character has to do with his concern with justice. So because justice would have to be positively stated as a command somehow, and therefore you can't have the occulted situation of the anarchy, because there'd be no enunciation of justice. Or, I mean, in this very simple sense of which locker room should this person go into? It has to be stated. It has to be made, brought into, or we have to know what the command is. So if you have this example Heidegger gives of the Lectern, how so far could that be thought analogously with these deliberate experiments in Wolfgang Keller? Like, so there's a situation where people know how to read. They want to read something in public. They want it to be to facilitate that, to make it more commodious for themselves. So they come up with this piece of furniture, the lectern, which stands before the lecturer, where lecturer really means reader, allowing that word has drifted a little bit. We hear, I think, in the English language, this notion of lecturing and a lecturer, not necessarily in connection with reading, which is the original meaning. But in any case, you can see the lectern allows someone to put their, say, their scroll or their lecture notes or whatnot on that piece of furniture. And Heidegger then gives an example of what if this, and then it's kind of hard to formulate the rest of it, because we can't really say what if this object, because then we get into, then we're out of the way Heidegger's trying to formulate it. But what if this being, this which is, we're comporting ourselves towards, as it were, in splitting out, and this is the problem I'm trying to solve also. How so far can we think of the comporting or the Verstellen as the questioning itself, or as what's due to, there's this larger problem, like we want to do this reading, we want to lecture, or maybe in the environment of a classroom or something, and then we solve it by bringing this lectern being into existence in contradistinction to whatever that being would be in another world. So, like in Hubert Dreyfus, he's talked about the Gods Must Be Crazy film example with the Coke bottle falling out of the sky into um, amongst people who had never seen it. But you could also think of, and Heidegger gives the example of the lectern in the middle of a forest somewhere or so, where maybe the people, their prime problem, so to speak, is external environmental. They have to negotiate that forest. Then, therefore, the lectern is understood, and maybe there's dangerous animals about. And therefore, maybe they understand this primarily as an obstacle in their way, not as a piece of furniture, not as a lectern. But then you have this starting position, like, so there's something and it's a lectern, or there's something and it's an obstacle, or supposing in some other place, say what the territory we now call China, um, um, would it be a lectern there? Supposing we were in a period of history where there were no lecterns, where there were no um, classrooms in quite the same way, where classrooms weren't set up that way, where the idea of the teacher was much different. Would we then understand the verhalten, or the comportment, according to the whole Chinese world in an analogy with the idea of a problem being set, which then the problem being set brings these things first to our sight, the something, and then the other half of the something is this stating the command about, which is sort of brings us into all these ambivalences about whether we're in, as Agamben is bringing out, whether we're in the sense of Parmenides, we're saying being is, we're stating it, or whether we're saying in the sense of of a tradition which gives commands. We're saying, let there be being, let there be, like, let there be light, or Yahweh commanding the world to come into, the heavens and the earth to come into existence. Let there be a division between the waters, between the heavens and the earth, or so. This question, by the way, in John Austin, and not John Austin the jurist, but John Austin, the guy that wrote this book about how to do things with words, broke down there. Also, I believe there's basically the speech act theory. I forget the exact terms he used in there, but it's hard to distinguish between the same thing we're saying here, the efficacious speech where you say, now the Starbucks is open or something, and then are you authorized to say that? And then speech where we're just saying the Starbucks is open, as though to simply affirm something that already is. In affirming it, well, then you have to go into all kinds of questions, which then led, this the second wave of speech act theories with the scandalous Mr. John Searle. Searle, who already was very antagonistic to, let's say, so-called continental thinking, and therefore sort of regarded as an enemy for many people, I suppose. Even before his, as I overheard someone say, his epaulets were taken away from him due to the scandals he was involved with recently. But putting that aside, how close can we get in thinking these analogy to what Heidegger is saying in verhalten, in comportment, and how far does that bring us directly to the question of whether, is it that the Greek thinking was just too sterile in the sense of, and therefore Nietzsche's thinking, in a funny way, too sterile, in that it doesn't see this move between the wider world setting a problem, which then brings the beings into existence according to the problem. And then Heidegger wants to say, we're now that we're aware of this, it's no longer just a question of problems being set to us, but of an open question. Is something like that. Um, yeah, it's hard to even approach the examples of nature unless we have something like that, which is already exercising ourselves as a notion of what we're looking for. Like, because otherwise, you could just, for instance, you could just say, oh, the Chinese are some kind of animals in an environment and they have to solve these and these problems, and then they end up doing it this way and that way, just like, and then we regard ourselves in the same way. And it seems impossible not to have some kind of overarching sense of what is the same in order to compare. And yes, I know there's this so-called exhortation to not to make comparisons, but how do you start from zero then maximum life or creativity? But okay, so let's try to go on with that thought as best we can in the next go. And again, I think the Agamben uh, is one interesting way to um, approach these things. Also, I liked something as a correct structure. Maybe it should be something is better, and we should try to think this verhalten in connection to, let's say, four parts of Greek thinking, medieval thinking, and German idealism. And then Heidegger wants to say he's doing none of these, but he's come into this verhalten. I don't know if it's at all adequate, not to say even just simply in the wrong direction to look at it in this analogous way that I'm suggesting. But okay, I'll try. I'm just going to make that feint and try it.